If you haven't already seen the video where George Ryals talks about using a ping pong ball to be able to help you with your shot execution, I'm gonna link that video down in the description of this one. Watch that video, check it out. In today's video, we're gonna take this a step further and talk about something that I found out purely by accident, but it's a huge game changer when it comes to setting the speed of a hinge, especially for people that have a tendency to hang up on their index or have a problem with their click. And also by setting up your thumb button and making sure you have correct pressure on the trigger itself, and also making sure that your hand is working correctly with each release as well. First things that I want to cover today is just some of the quick basics on how the hand actually works when you're using a release. One thing that we have to understand is that whether it be a thumb button release or a hinge release, the horseshoe part of our palm here, these muscles on our thumb pad side, the muscles here on our pinky side, those are actually gonna have to be relaxed and allow your hand to be able to move and stretch, and allowing a release to either rotate or transfer pressure into the thumb barrel. Using the ping pong ball that GRIV talked about, being able to help you execute your shot, allows you to get this ping pong ball in your hand and focus on it moving backwards. This is allowing your hand on the outer portions to be the driving force and allow the release to rotate on a hinge or create pressure against the trigger on a thumb button. The way that I worked on this and what I found completely by accident is that how we have our release set up with our hand pressures, trigger pressure on a thumb button, and rotation speed with our index finger on a hinge release can actually be set up almost entirely by what we're doing with this ping pong ball. And what I mean by that is when we're working on it with a thumb button release, if our thumb is not set up on the trigger with enough tension preloaded into that trigger, when we start working through this drill, the release is not going to fire. If we do set up the thumb with enough pressure on the trigger, when we start working through this drill, the release will fire. That's going to help us decide, one, if we're engaging the thumb correctly, and also two, if we have the trigger tension set up close in that ideal range for us. And there we can just transfer that through with our shot timing and fine tune it. Now how this looks is that when we're actually shooting the bow, we need to be doing this with blank bale. This is an up close drill, and this is not something that you're using with your normal firing method. This is literally just a test to see thumb engagement on a thumb button release and trigger tension on that thumb button release, and make sure our hand is working correctly for us. When we're at full draw, what we're gonna start doing is holding this ping pong ball in our palm, and we want to be able to squeeze it with these outer muscles of our hands, squeezing it together. You can do this with a 2-finger or a 3-finger. You can do it with a 4-finger release. It is a little bit harder, but you can. Now you can also squeeze into this release with our outer pinky or pinky and ring finger if you're using a 2-finger release, but you want it to be engaged by these outer muscles in the palm. And the reason we want to do that is because as we're working through the drill, we are maintaining good back wall pressure and relaxing the outer parts of our hand, relaxing the pinky or ring and pinky fingers if that's how you're holding the ping pong ball. And we want to see what happens with the shot itself. If we notice that the ping pong ball is falling out of our hand completely before the shot fires, that is telling you that you either don't have good preload on the trigger with your thumb, or you're not allowing yourself to be able to actually get into that release and set up solid pressure and tension on it. Something is wrong. The trigger tension could be too heavy, but typically it's just the preload along with the trigger tension that is not matching up. If you have a heavier trigger, you need a heavier preload. A lighter trigger, you need a lighter preload. But a lot of us get into a tendency of having almost a hair trigger on these thumb button releases. And when we're actually shooting with them, we will start allowing that thumb to leak and come off the trigger almost, and create a long hung up shot where it just won't fire. And that's what you're seeing when that ping pong ball is falling and dropping out of the hand before the shot fires. In reverse of that, if we are putting good trigger tension with our thumb as that preload on there, we will actually see that as we're relaxing the outer part of our hand, relaxing those outer fingers, keeping good solid back wall tension, we will see that shot fire before the ping pong ball falls. And that's what you're looking for. If you're able to fire a shot by relaxing that hand prior to the ping pong ball falling out of it, we know that we are in a solid position with your preload on the trigger and the trigger tension that you're using currently. And that is the way that we use this with the thumb button release to be able to help us work through these and make it a lot simpler on your setup. Now, when it comes to using a hinge release, this is where I really find this method shines and makes the process so much simpler and easier, especially if you're new to hinge releases. Using a hinge release is definitely more involved and difficult compared to a thumb button release as far as the mechanics of what's going on. There's more ways to mess this up and make your life a lot harder. One of those ways that is very common is being way too rigid on our index finger and over rotating these releases and just cranking on this index. If I do that and I try to pull on this release is never going to fire no matter what I do. And it's the exact same way when you start pulling really hard into that back wall with your bow. If you never see the release rotating and firing, it's because we're too much pressure, we're squeezing too hard on the index finger and the release is just not being allowed to rotate. Another thing is like what we talked about with the thumb button releases is these outer portions of our hand, this horseshoe here and these muscles, they have to be relaxed as well, really even more so than a thumb button release in order to allow your hinge to really work. And you have to engage these outer fingers, but you have to engage them without taking the total natural rotation of this hinge out of the equation. And what I mean by that is that if I'm holding this release like this and I go to wrap my fingers around this release, you can see that it rocks and moves to this location here. This is naturally where it's moving all on its own. Now, if I have this release set up where I'm not engaging these outer fingers, it's never going to rock to that position. But in reverse, if I have my outer fingers engaged too far and it's beyond that natural rotation, then at that point, I've got to really squeeze and work into that release or really manipulate and do something different. So using these hinge releases are very much a balance game of finding the correct rotation. Using this ping pong ball method that we're using today, where I'm going through the exact same process we talked about with the thumb release, is going to be a game changer when it comes to a hinge. Right off the bat, you can see that when you're holding this release with the outer parts of your hand, drawing the bow back, getting into full draw, if we're too much on the index and we're worried about the release firing, we have the release set too hot, we won't even be able to get to full draw without the ping pong ball falling out of our hand. And that's a clear indicator that you're not drawing the bow back correctly and you don't have the hinge speed set up correctly for you either. Now, when we get to full draw and we have that initial setup done correctly for us, we can actually work through that same process. We can see if we're getting into the click correctly, because if we're engaging these outer fingers by holding on to this ping pong ball, that should allow us to get to the click when we get into full draw, get into that final anchor position and build up that final tension of a little bit of push and pull to steady ourselves on target. That should allow you to get to that click. If you're not getting to the click at that point, we want to check and make sure that we're actually getting tension on that ping pong ball in the palm and we're holding on to it with the pinky or with your outer fingers or whatever it is, and that ping pong ball is not really loose and about to fall out. If we have enough tension like that and we're not getting to the click with that final little push and pull that's going on, probably have the release set up too slowly, and we need to adjust that a little bit faster to where that is happening for you. Now from here, once we have that initial click and speed set up there on that hinge release, we're going to repeat the same process of slowly relaxing the outer horseshoe of the hand and those outer fingers and seeing if the shot fires before we drop the ping pong ball. If you're using a release with a click, 9 times out of 10, that release is going to fire before the ping pong ball hits the ground, because the amount of rotation after the click happens to when it fires is not going to be a very big distance. If you're not using a click, this is going to be a really good time to dial in the overall hinge speed. I recommend starting this slowly and having the release set too slow and then just working it back a little bit faster at a time. It's safe doing it this way, but it also allows you to get comfortable with the release, not be timid, and do this drill correctly. If we're shooting our shot and we're relaxing that hand while we're blank belling here and allowing that ping pong ball not to fall out of our hand before the shot fires, then we know with this hinge release, we have it set up on a baseline to be very close to perfect for what we're going to need. Our index is not going to be too engaged on the release where we're gonna hang up on it a lot and have problems firing the release, and it's going to allow us to have a lot smoother shot when we take it to a target at normal distance. In our members video today, we are going to stay on the path of talking about this ping pong ball in our shot, and I'm actually gonna dissect George Ryals' video a little bit on the process, what I have found using this with different styles and types of releases, and hopefully give you some tips to make your life a little bit easier when you're actually doing this on your own. If you watched to this point in the video, thank you for supporting this channel. Make sure that you're liking these videos. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what other mini-series you would like to see. This is going to be the conclusion of our release execution mini-series, and we'll be starting up a new one next week over a totally different topic. So if you've got things that you're wondering about, that's on your mind that you would like for me to cover, let me know down below. Thank you again for watching today. I'll see you soon.